chess friends, hope you are doing well. Today, I am very excited to share an intense and masterful chess game played between Ethereal and me. Ethereal is a super chess engine and currently holds the top 10 chess engine position globally. This game is very strong and unbelievable, so, let's get started without wasting any time. I started the game with d4, and he chose to play f5. In this position, he could have gone with d5, something like knight to f6, or even b6 is also playable, but he decided to go with f5. After a couple of moves, when he played knight f6, he controlled the center and could play b6 followed by bishop b7 to control the center squares. So, after e3 and bishop moving out to d3, he placed his bishop on b7 to control this very good diagonal. I blocked the bishop's sniper by playing f3, and my knight went out to e2, looking forward to these squares. After bishop b4 and castling, followed by king to h8, we continued. Some of you may argue that I am showing the game very quickly. But you know the reason very easily. I want to make this content in 7 to 9 minutes. Anyway, it safeguards the king from any potential attacks from the bishop on this diagonal. By playing queen e8 and g6, it exerts pressure on the king side, where the white king may castle in the future. After a few moves, we have a3 to kick out the bishop. It's a questionable move whether to take the knight or not. Taking the knight would cause no issues for white. The bishop is the only piece attacking white, and the rest of black's pieces are just in a defensive mode. Although they have potential attacks in the future and can move frequently on the board, he decided to play bishop a5 because he is more concerned with capturing the dark square bishop. After castling, knight c6 happened on the board to protect the pawn on b4. Black wants to eliminate the dark square bishop, so I moved my bishop back to e1 to consider bishop g3 to access this great diagonal. After a few moves, we have knight h5 kicking out the bishop right away, and after the rook moves to d1, knight f6 a6 and king h1 followed by g5 happened on the board. You can see that Ethereal is pushing his pawns forward, creating weaknesses. But it can also be a source of attack by maneuvering the queen to g7 and the rook to launch a heavy attack on this file. To break open the kingside structure, I played queen b1 a few moves ago to push forward the pawn on b4, after knight g3 followed by queen to c1, and a couple of moves later, we have knight to a2. This knight a2 is critical to push the pawn on b4. Some of you might argue to push the pawn on b5, but after the exchange, the c5 pawn will be vulnerable, which is why I decided to go with d5, kicking out the knight to consider before attacking the bishop. After a few moves, we have f4, and instead of capturing the pawn, he played knight g6, inviting me to capture the pawn on g5 so his queen can be activated on g5, but I decided to launch a heavy attack by playing b4, trapping the bishop right in the corner. After the capture, d6 follows to block the queen's diagonal. Consequently, he played h4 to kick out the knight, and eventually, he played knight h5 to increase the pressure on the f4 pawn, opening up the diagonal for the bishop, but I captured the bishop on a5 because it was unguarded. After rook g7, to exert pressure along this file, I played e4, it opens up the diagonal for the bishop and simultaneously puts pressure on the pawn on g5. After the capture, bishop d4 happens, we have e5, the bishop captures. And the knight goes to c3, my knight has potential chances to play knight b4, attacking the pawn, and by playing knight e5, it will exert more pressure in the center and will capture the pawn on c4, but it is a completely blundered move because bishop d3 puts pressure on the pawn on a6. I can quickly pick up the pawn on a6, exerting more pressure on the rook. Some of you might be tempted to safeguard the rook by playing rook e8, but after bishop e2, attacking the knight. As the knight reaches g3 and some pieces are exchanged on e4, the queen will go to c4 to attack the king and the bishop simultaneously. You will lose the game very quickly because I have a passed pawn on the a file. So let me share a beautiful quote for you. Your thoughts create your reality. If you want a positive life, fill your mind with positive thoughts. Going back to the position, we saw that you cannot safeguard the rook, which is why Ethereal tried to maneuver his knight by playing knight f8, but I have no greed for the rook. I played rook d2 to protect the pawn on g2, which is being attacked by the queen and rook. later on, the diagonal might be exposed for the light squared bishop. Alright, we have captured and recaptured, and e3 is on the board. This exposes the diagonal for the light squared bishop, and honestly, you cannot safeguard your rook. Because after queen takes g2 followed by rook takes g2, rook takes g2 will ultimately come, and knight g3 will lead to a checkmate, and the game will be just over for you. So returning to the position, we saw that any rook move is not viable, which is why I decided to go with knight e4, trying to attack the queen and block the bishop's diagonal simultaneously. After the capture, queen c4 follows to attack the king and the bishop at the same time, knight e6 follows, and here I played the brilliant move g4, I mean, in this position, I am triggering the bishop, but you cannot capture the bishop because queen takes d2 will win the rook. This is the reason why, in this position, I decided to go with g4, blocking the king's side completely. Of course en passant is possible, but after en passant, I can capture the pawn on d7, attacking the knight on e6 and putting pressure on the bishop on e4. Eventually, bishop to f5 is not viable to safeguard the knight because I can play the astonishing move, which I think you haven't imagined, rook takes f5, sacrificing the rook to capture the piece on e6 and attack the queen voluntarily. You will lose the queen, so returning to the position, we saw that en passant is not possible, which is why we have queen g6 to protect the knight and the bishop at the same time. After the knight moves, and after a couple of moves, we have rook a2 to energize the a-pawn. A couple of moves later, I sacrificed the queen on c6, which is just a brilliant move. This sacrifice left my pawn to become a queen on the next move. Eventually, knight e6 is not possible because a7. a8 will be another queen on the corner of the board. After rook g8 and exchanges happen on d8, we have knight g3 to put pressure on the rook. After the capture, we have queen d3. You cannot capture the bishop right away because a7, a8 will be a new queen. This is the reason why we have queen d3. Eventually, you cannot play a7 right on the board because queen takes f1 will come, followed by queen to h1, it will ruin your position and checkmate you, which is why instead of playing a7, I played bishop f5 check, forcing you to capture. After the capture, you still cannot play a7 because there is the e2 move and queen g3 check, so after rook d1, e2 followed by capture, and a couple of moves later, we have rook to d8 check rook d7 and rook to h7. In this juggernaut, black still cannot capture the pawn on a6 because after rook d2, checkmate will be unstoppable. The black king can't give me a single check, and it will ruin your position completely. In this position, Ethereal has to play queen g3 check, forcing me to capture. And a couple of moves later, it becomes a checkmate on the a8 square. What a brilliant game it was. I hope you enjoyed my game. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Wishing you all the best. Bye bye, see ya.